Welcome to Sacred Realms. As this episode's coming out just a few days before Christmas, we wanted to wish you a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays from Sacred Realms, a Zelda Retrospective Podcast. We're so thankful for all of our listeners, and we're reminded every week, every day, that we are incredibly blessed to be in this position, to have such a wonderful and supportive community, and to have had the opportunity to build something that we're so proud of. In the spirit of the occasion, please enjoy this special intro music provided to us by Il Maestro himself, Darknuck. This is his mashup of Carol of the Bells and the Song of Storms titled Carol of the Storms. May it bring you festive joy, and as always, please go to Spotify and give it a listen there. Darknuck does amazing work, and this track melted mine and Matt's faces off. We really hope that you enjoy it. And now, on with the show. It's a great day in Hyrule, y'all. Welcome to Sacred Realms, a Zelda Retrospective Podcast. I am your host, Lyndon Willoughby. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Matt Willoughby, for our first episode of Season 11 of Sacred Realms Pod. You ready to start a new season, Matt?
I am. It's a very tiny season, Lyndon. Also because of the game, but also
would you say that it's been shrunk?
Yes, yeah. It has been shrunk. It's gone through a portal in a tree stump and become smaller.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I wonder, I don't know how much further we can carry that analogy forward, but it was apt, and I appreciate you kind of drawing that line there.
I had to try to throw in a small pun in there somewhere. If you don't throw in an episode on this season, then that's going to be a miss.
No, that's fair. You saw opportunity and you seized it, and I would expect nothing less from, at this point, a seasoned podcaster like yourself.
Thank you.
At the point that you have 11 seasons of a podcast, I think you're a seasoned podcaster.
Are we? Yeah, sure. Why not? We can go with it.
A little more seasoned.
It's a horrible thing to say to a man.
There's our Star Trek drop for the week.
Yay! Getting out of the way early.
Bonus points to anyone who can write us a comment on our socials and tell us what episode that came from. Anyway, I know off the top of my head.
Great episode.
Great episode. Awesome one. Yeah. Anyway, firing up a new season here, Matt, and honestly, I've been looking forward to this one for quite a long time. I know that both of us have. After Twilight Princess, which was a really fun time, but undeniably just required a lot more time investment of both of us.
Yeah, it was a slog. Doesn't give the right connotation because it has kind of a negative connotation, and I don't mean that in a negative way at all. So slog is the best I'm coming up with right now.
It was monumental.
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
It was a lot. And in a good way, it was a lot of fun. We really enjoyed our time with that game, liked getting back into it, revisiting some of our past preconceptions and pushing through some of those, confirming some of those past preconceptions.
Yeah, I was going to say, not pushing through all of them.
No, confirmed quite a few of them. But that's why we do it, right? We admit when we're wrong, and sometimes we're not wrong.
Sometimes we're not wrong.
That's very rare.
I love those days.
Yeah,
those are great.
They're rare. They're few and far between. But when they come around, they're nice.
The nice thing is we're committing examples of us not being wrong to the public record for just for posterity.
Yeah.
Right? It's
really
out there.
Fun. And look, to be fair, we are saying that we aren't wrong when we're looking at our past preconceptions. So our past selves were not wrong. So it's kind of self-confirmation bias. But Still, I'll take it.
That's okay.
Yeah, any win is a win.
It's still in the ye old W column.
Whether you win by a mile or win by a second, a win is a win.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, Matt. I love
the Fast and the Furious.
I love your outlook on the whole situation. It's great.
It's a Dominic Toretto quote.
Yeah, exactly right. I almost had you. You never had me. You never had your car. Yeah. Anyway,
great movie.
Great movie. Fast and the Furious. How often do we get that?
I think this is the first
kind
time
of bubbling up to the surface on the. Yeah, okay, cool.
Which is weird because we should have a lot of family references because we have a lot of family on the podcast.
Right,
and like friends who we
right.
consider family.
Yeah.
I'm surprised we don't have more of those. But.
Okay, cool. Well, if a Zelda game ever has us take a car to space, then I'm sure we'll have another opportunity, but doesn't seem likely.
No, I don't think that is likely to happen in a Zelda game. No.
Oh, man. This is fun. This is the first episode in quite a while that you and I have been able to just record us two together. Of course, we start every season of the show pretty much in that way. And I like that. I think that's good operating procedure for us, Matt. I think that kind of helps us to like recenter just the main vibe of the foundation of the show, right?
Right.
After weeks and weeks and weeks of multiple amazing guest hosts, right? It's nice to kind of bring things back and just enjoy a little bit more of a chat like we had in the old days.
Yep. No, we have the best guests of any podcast, and we love them all dearly. I appreciate the
all other podcasts, the worst guests.
Just ask anybody.
They'll tell you.
We have the best guests. God. Okay. I'm ashamed of myself for joining you in on that bit, but okay.
Come at me, Schwani man. I'll take your 1-star reviews.
God. Anyway, I was saying that I enjoy being just the two of us because we get more of that in the mix.
We do.
When it's just the two of us.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anyone else enjoys it quite as much, but we enjoy it.
And then, of course, when we get the detective on it, it's just the three of us. We get like a level that's extra. You like
that's when we start trying to convince ourselves that the Temple of Time in Twilight Princess is the best dungeon in that game.
Right. Hey, you know what? There was a kernel of a good point in there.
It was probably the most like weirdly fun. But anyway, we talked about that at length. We're not going to revisit it now.
So, yeah, always fun to get into a new season of the show anyway, especially, I mean, honestly, this is kind of a very busy time of the year, and with holidays coming up and several other unannounced projects that we're working on at the moment, Matt and I just have got a few different things on our plate at right now. And so because of that, especially looking at the walkthrough that I pulled up to make the schedule for this season, I definitely had a moment where I sat back in my chair and just had a little sigh of relief where I was like, oh, this one's going to be a little bit more manageable.
Thank
right?
goodness.
Like,
yeah. We're not putting in 5-ish hours of gameplay time plus 2.5 hours of recording plus editing plus everything else. Plus 3 hours of plot recap writing. We were pushing almost part-time job level commitment on Twilight Princess last season.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're in a little easier going boat.
Honestly, it's impressive that we managed to get ahead on our recording schedule at all during that period of time.
We did. We corrected. We were in a real bad way at the beginning of the season, and we had a little course correction. So I'm glad we got there. And we're still ahead. Yeah. Go us. I think this is the longest period of time we've been ahead since you had child.
I'm really proud of us, honestly.
Yeah.
This is a good thing. We should continue trying to do this. So regardless, it was very fun to get back into a top-down Zelda game this week. I know Minish Cap is one that we've been looking forward to for a very long time, simply because it's one that you and I don't think you have really any experience with Minish Cap,
I've
right?
beaten Minish Cap before.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
We both have talked about Minish Cap being one of our favorite top-down titles.
Okay, cool.
It's in the top 3 at least, between Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, and this, I think, are the top 3 that we've kicked around.
But it's been quite a long time for you, right? I mean,
it was probably like high school when I beat it, so that was over a decade ago.
Yeah.
Which is insane, but is a fact. Yes.
Yeah. The last time that I played Minish Cap was actually, so there was this brief period of time where I forget what the name of this software was, but it was an app that you could download on iPhone platforms, and basically it was like a golden ticket to retro game emulation that was available in the App Store on iPhones, and it has since been nuked off of the App Store years and years and years ago, right?
Yeah.
Like it was definitely violating some terms of service in some way. But anyway, back when Colleen and I first started dating, so this was this would have been in the winter/spring of 2014. So almost a decade for me.
Wow.
Which is crazy. Anyway, so I had the game downloaded on my iPhone, and I got one of those little Razer dock controllers that basically turned it was a Switch before there was a Switch.
Yeah,
right?
you like put your phone in it, and it like
yeah. So I got one of those Bluetooth controller docks, and I played Minish Cap that way the last time, because even back in 2014. This was not a game that was easy to get a hold of and play via official means, right? Like,
sure.
It was the exact same issue then that it is now. Not that it is now, but that it was prior to Game Boy games dropping on Nintendo Switch Online, right? You had to go and you had to hunt down a cartridge at a used game store at a premium, right? The only other way that this was really possible to play officially was if you got a Nintendo 3DS in the first, I want to say 6 months of it being on sale, then you were part of what was called the Ambassador Program, and Nintendo included certain games for download on the 3DS within that 6 months. And I forget what all of them were. I have an inkling that maybe Metroid Zero Mission was one of them. I don't remember exactly, but Minish Cap definitely was. And so if you picked up a 3DS in the first 6 months, you could get Minish Cap and download it for free. And then you could just transfer it through the entire 3DS life cycle. Like, so there are still people who have got it on their new 3DS XLs and things like that, but they never sold it digitally in the Switch Online store.
Yeah.
So if you didn't get it in that first 6 months, you were completely SOL. Like Minish Cap. Actually, that's not entirely true. You could download it on the Virtual Console on the Wii U.
That sounds like a horrible way to try to play this game.
I think it was fine, right? Like playing it on the gamepad.
Oh, yeah. I guess
the
gamepad would be all right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't know that playing this game on an HD flat screen 60-something inch TV is...
Sounds like a good time. Yeah, I'm playing it fully handheld on the Switch, for sure.
Me as well. But all that is to say, the path to playing Minish Cap has not been easy. Now, thankfully, we're in a much more enlightened time, and if you have the Nintendo Switch Online subscription, then you can just you can play it as a part of that whole collection, and it's hunky-dory.
Did you ever play it on your Game Boy Mini that you had? The Capcom made Game Boy Mini for the Capcom game, Zelda game about Tiny Link. Well, that sounds like it would be a good combination.
I think you're mixing a few things in your head. So that Game Boy Mini, so its actual name was the Game Boy Advance Micro.
Yeah, whatever.
And it was not made by Capcom. It was just a weird little thing that Nintendo decided to do one year.
But yours had like a Capcom red casing.
No, it was colored to be the same theme as the original Famicom.
Famicom, that's right.
Yeah. So
okay.
the original, the Japanese version of the NES was gold and red.
Do you see how I got there though? Famicom.
Yeah,
Capcom?
no, yeah, I got you. So anyway, no, I never played Minish Cap on the tiny Game Boy Advance. That would have made a lot of sense. That thing basically existed. That was my Fire Red Leaf Green machine.
I do remember you playing a lot of Fire Red Leaf Green on that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I actually still have that. I need to go charge it up. Had this not come out on the Switch when it did, then I would have gotten a bootleg cart off Etsy, and I would have played it on the Mini.
Yeah,
or on the
I would have had to borrow a friend's Game Boy SP and done the same thing.
Thankfully, we
I already
didn't have
had
to
that lined up, by the way.
Okay. Thankfully, we didn't have to do any of that. So
this was much easier when things are on the Switch. Wow, almost like Nintendo should put every Zelda game on the Switch. Crazy.
Yeah.
What?
Of the 4 or 5 examples of us really wishing Nintendo would do this in a timely manner for our show,
this is the first one that panned out.
Yeah, they came through and actually did it this time. So thank you, Nintendo. We appreciate you.
And it's going to work well for the oracles too, because they're on there now. Yay!
Yep, absolutely. But anyway, mostly it's just like having the convenience factor is great because I'm playing games in bed again, which is awesome. But really, I'm just happy to be back in a top-down Zelda game, and especially one that has a bit more of a classic art style and vibe to it, right? Like I know Phantom Hourglass was, top down according to basically any definition, right?
Sure.
But like not exactly the vibe that I was chasing here, right? Like
sure.
If I'm chasing that top down Zelda dragon, then Phantom Hourglass was not what I was looking for there.
No, but Minish Cap is, and hi Gatsby, he agrees. Yeah, I think we've both really, really enjoyed our first little section. Like we were texting throughout the week while we were kind of playing through it, and both of us have very similar reactions of, yeah, this is good. This is fun.
Yeah.
So super excited to get more into it, of course.
Yeah. So Matt, we've already kind of said, what our histories are with the Minish Cap. Do you have any kind of concept of, I don't know, maybe like what your thoughts and feelings were about the game from a critical standpoint going into it?
Yeah, so this is one of my earlier top-down Zeldas that I ever actually beat. It may even be the first top-down Zelda that I beat, because I played Link's Awakening when it came out on the Game Boy Advance, but I never beat it. I played like almost all of it and didn't beat it. I think I played it all on a road trip one time, and then the road trip ended.
Sorry, I blanked. Which one?
Link's Awakening.
So you probably would have played Link's Awakening DX on the Game Boy Color.
Yeah. So I think I played it on one of our road trips to Nebraska, and then the road trip ended and I hadn't beaten it, and then I just like didn't pick it up again for whatever reason. I was in a weird like ADHD phase with games back then. So I think Minish Cap is the first top-down Zelda that I ever fully completed, and I just have very fond memories of this game. I like this game a lot. I think that I rank it the highest of the top-down Zelda games, except maybe the Link's Awakening remaster.
Okay.
Like, it's so much fun to me.
Yeah, so you actually got much further into it on your first playthrough than I did. I got this game, I want to say that Mom and Dad got it for me for a birthday one year, around when it came out. We actually checked the release date on this real fast.
Yeah, sure.
But anyway, so I played, I want to say 2/3 or so of the game. Again, on like road trips, car rides to school, that sort of thing. But I never actually beat it the first time that I played it. Just for whatever reason. I mean, that was, like you're saying, a certain stage of life. I mean, when I had game time after school in the evenings, I was playing Halo, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And Splinter Cell, and like I had the Xbox, and so I was getting into all that. It was all happening right around the same time, and so this was actually a phase of my life where I was not 2004. Cool. This is a phase of my life where I was not keeping up with the Zelda series as much as I do now. And so, yeah, it kind of went under the radar for me after those first few hours. And then it wasn't until years later, after college, when I was kind of like, I had just beaten, I want to say I had just beaten A Link Between Worlds, and when it came out in 2013, and I enjoyed it, and I was looking for some similar vibes, and I wanted to be on that Zelda train hard, not on Spirit Tracks, but on the Zelda train generally,
yes.
right? And so, so I was like, well, Minish Cap, that was fun when I played it. I should go track that back down and actually beat it. And so I did, and thoroughly enjoyed it. Like, one of those games that to me was like, in my mind, it was this wonderful combination of classic top-down Zelda feel, but also with a lot of freshening up, right?
Mm-hmm.
With a lot of stuff that was just kind of, this is like next level top-down Zelda stuff, just in terms of side quests and collectibles and economies and like, combat, like getting combat moves, and the fact that you have a roll button, and just and the graphics as well, right? So it really did hold up, and I had a great time with it. And I'm finding all of those things to be true so far, just in the small amount that we've played for this episode, which is great. Yeah,
absolutely. I think I don't have much more to add there, other than it's just as good as I remember it being so far.
So the release date we said was 2004. What was the
November
of 2004? Okay, cool. So, cool. Hey, guess what else came out that month?
Halo 2.
Halo 2. Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't play any of that game.
So much of that game. So much.
Wow. What a time, man.
That was the golden age.
Do you remember like the hype?
I do remember, and I specifically remember the poster that had in Halo 3 when they had Master Chief with the gravity hammer, but in Halo 2, Master Chief with the energy sword, and then it was revealed you could play as an elite, and that was insanely hype level. Like that.
I don't think we figured
9,000.
I think that was a secret until everyone got it on the first night and started playing it.
I think I found out because you played it before me. So
Okay.
I found out from you that happened. And I was like, whoa.
Well, I played the game 2 days after it came out because I got grounded
Yeah, you probably deserved it.
for grades. Yeah, it was grades. I was bad at school. Yeah.
You were really bad at school.
Yeah. That's okay. I'm good at adult things now.
Some of them, yes.
The important ones.
Yeah. Sure.
The things that keep me in a house paying my mortgage.
Yes. Yeah, you're good at those things for sure.
And all like wifeyed up with a kid and everything, you know?
Well, yeah. Those are the important things in life for some people. And you kind of knocked it out of the park with the wife and the kid, at least.
Thank you.
They're great.
Yeah. You know what? That's a big old win column moment, and I appreciate you recognizing me for it. Yeah.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and do Whiskey Bit, I think. Sounds like a fun thing to do, especially on this chilly night.
Indeed. Whiskey Bit.
And then we'll do housekeeping and get into the actual meat of the episode. So for Whiskey Bit tonight, we've got something pretty bougie, if we're being honest.
Indeed. And if you don't like Whiskey Bit, go ahead and fast forward. And again, always drink responsibly.
Yay. So tonight we are sampling the Woodford Masters Collection Sonoma Triple Finish. That is the 2023 Masters Collection. I know last Whiskey Bit we had one that's, it was another Woodford Masters Collection, but it was significantly older. This one is brand new off the line. It's the 19th. In the Masters Collection series. And I'm just going to read you the little blurb that they have here on the website because it's pretty exciting sounding. For this 2023 release, Master Distiller Elizabeth McCall has drawn upon prior creative releases and continued product experimentation for inspiration. In 2014, the Masters Collection released the Pinot Noir finished Kentucky bourbon, Sonoma Pinot finish. This was followed in 2016 with the first ever American brandy cask finished bourbon, which is what we had last week, 2 weeks ago. Yeah,
it was at least 2 weeks ago, maybe more.
The Pinot Noir and brandy barrels used for these releases were obtained from famous Sonoma County wineries. These releases featured big, bold red and dried fruit flavors along with dark chocolate and baking spice notes. At the same time, many wineries began to age their red wines in used Woodford Reserve barrels to create new bourbon barrel-aged wine genre. These wines featured rich vanilla and caramel notes. This inspired Elizabeth to experiment with various combinations of the three, including finishing Woodford Reserve in Sonoma County wine barrels that had originally been used to mature Woodford Reserve. So there's like a whole, like a vicious cycle of like distilling
fun.
Barrels that's happening here.
So they do a Woodford Reserve barrel, send it to a winery. The winery ages their wine in the Woodford Reserve barrel, and then Woodford takes it back and ages this Masters Collection in that barrel.
Yep.
That's fun.
The result, Sonoma Triple Finish, is a unique blend of Woodford Reserve straight Kentucky bourbon whiskey that has been finished in Sonoma County Pinot Noir, brandy, and former bourbon barrels.
Cool. That's fun. By the way, I love a bourbon barrel finished wine.
Especially
a Cabernet.
Oh, it's great.
A cab that's been finished in bourbon barrels.
Awesome combination of things, yeah. So anyway, the notes you're supposed to be getting off of this are rich, fruity, vanilla, and spice forward, in addition to traditional Woodford Reserve flavors. So, cheers to the fine art of whiskey distilling.
And wine. Creation.
Yeah, two things that we love.
Venting, I think is what it's called. That's quite tasty. Yeah, that's really good. It's kind of sweet, kind of vanilla, kind of heavy on the fruit notes. Yeah, that's really good.
You do get wine from that.
In a good way, yes.
I wish, so it's bottled at 90 proof.
I wish it was a little stouter.
I could have taken it at 95 or even 100.
Yeah. for sure.
Yeah.
It's good, though.
Delicious. Yeah.
I'd say that's more of a spring or summer whiskey than a winter whiskey, though.
It's not quite as spicy as what I'm looking for when I'm recording a podcast outside in December.
40 degrees.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But delicious nonetheless. So you should go track down a bottle for yourself. I think that'd be one you would be happy
I think
to have.
that would be one to add to my collection. I collect the nicer whiskey bottles, and I have them displayed. I've got a nice display shelf that I keep them on. So yeah, this would be a good addition to that collection.
Couldn't agree more. All right, let's get into the housekeeping and then launch into this episode. If you didn't know, Sacred Realms is a weekly re-examination of The Legend of Zelda, one little slice at a time. Sacred Realms drops every Wednesday and is available on all major podcast networks. Every week, we play a new section of a Zelda game, and then we sit down here to talk and to drop our hot takes. If that sounds fun to you, please head over to Apple Podcasts, hit that subscribe button, and be sure to leave us a review. 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated, and they have a chance to get a shout-out here on the show. If you want more Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/sacredrealmspod. To get access to our Discord channel, listener mail, vote on what game we play next, and much more. Additionally, one of the benefits that Master Sword patrons and above get is that we read their names every week here on the show. Those legendary individuals are Brandon, Shryquill, Joseph, Nintendo, Adam, Sakura Sky, Art, Jeremy, Dante, Tom, Andy, Stephanie, Billy, Connor, Rachel, Shepherd Street, Matthew, Chris, Daniel, Fallout 907, Kelso, Chris, Tiffany, The Star, Daxel, Patrice, Stephanie, Darknuck, Il Maestro himself, who just actually put out a banger track on Spotify. It's
a good Christmas song.
Yeah, it's a mashup of Carol of the Bells and the Song of Storms, which two things that I never thought would go together.
But they sound awesome.
Melted my face off. It was incredible. Good job, Darknuck. Brian, George, Mike, Dylan, Lennon, Kolku, Aiden, Rowan, Josh, Nick, Gep, Brittany, Davey, Haru the Mighty, Derek, Albert, Mark, Andy, Cameron, Lowlife Lopez. Is that our guy?
Did he re-up? He was at the beginning, and then
December 9th, 2023.
Hey, he re-upped.
Hey, Lopez.
Hey.
We love you, buddy. Welcome back.
That's a good friend of Lyndon's from elementary school.
Childhood friend. What a guy. Daniel, Nick D _TV, Hyrule Interviews, a.k.a. Max Nichols, Garrett, and Drew. These are the most legendary of individuals, and I would gladly be shrunk to miniature size by a magical tribe of woodland critters with any of these people any day of the week.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that sounds really fun.
Man. I gotta say, I would, if being Minish entailed what it looks like it does in this section of the game where you're just like living in a
little tiny village,
idyllic forest village. It looks like a nice life.
I would totally do that. You're basically living in Hobbiton, but even smaller.
Yeah, you're like even more secret than hobbits are,
which is really cool.
Yeah,
I like it.
All right, well, let's go ahead and talk about what we played this week. We do that every week in the Sacred Realms Rundown, which is a 6-part analysis of what we played this week and the feelings that it made us feel. Today, we are covering the Minish Cap, Chapter 1. Part 1 of the Sacred Realms Rundown is, as always, the plot recap, this week read by Matt. Take it away, Matt.
A long, long time ago, when the world was on the verge of being swallowed by shadow, the tiny Picori appeared from the sky, bringing the hero of men a sword and a golden light. With wisdom and courage, the hero drove out the darkness. When peace had been restored, the people enshrined that blade with care. On a bright and sunny morning in the south of Hyrule stands a lonely cottage. This rather large cottage is oddly far from the rest of the inhabitants of the small kingdom, but it houses the greatest smith in the land and his grandson. On the road between the cottage and the town, a figure in regal robes of pink and blue, with long hair the color of spun gold, can be seen walking by herself towards the lonely home. It's an early morning for the Princess of Hyrule to be out and about, but today is a joyous occasion because the Picori Festival is in full swing. Zelda enters the blacksmith's hut and addresses him sweetly and kindly. The smith is shocked to see the realm's only princess all the way out here and all alone, but he is always happy to see her. Zelda came looking for us in hopes that we would accompany her to the festivities in town so we could enjoy the annual celebration together. Since we've been friends since childhood, Master Smith is more than happy to let us go to the festival with the princess. Master Smith calls upstairs to rouse us from bed so we can do just that. We wake up to the bright morning sun, still sore and tired from the all-night effort of finishing the sword that is to be awarded at the festival to the champion of the tournament. All the exhaustion leaves as we come downstairs to see our lifelong friend, Zelda, waiting for us in the room. We're thrilled to accompany her to the festival, for her company, and to see all the wonderful things that adorn the town during this time of the year. But nothing fun comes without a price, and we get saddled with a chore to deliver the very sword that we completed last night to the Prime Minister, so that he can present it to the winner of the sword tournament. With the sword in hand, we head off to the Castletown village with Zelda to see what fun there's to be had. We arrive at the town to see the festival in full swing. The townspeople are all a hustle and a bustle, pennants are fluttering in the wind, and good cheer suffuses the air. There are folks bartering for trinkets, telling stories to young children about the mythical Picori, and many people are talking in odd tones about the winner of this year's tournament. Zelda immediately darts off into the crowd, calling us from one stall to the next, flitting from storytellers to vendors, and enjoying every moment of the colorful festival. She even wins the lottery game and selects a small painted shield as her prize, which she promptly gifts to us as thanks for escorting her around the festival. The shield may be tiny, but it is well made, and truth be told, kinda cute. After talking to a few more folks, we decided we better head to the castle to deliver the sword and make sure that no one is panicking over the missing princess. So we set off to the north. Before we make it all the way to the castle, we're stopped by a pesky Deku scrub who has taken up residence in the nearby hedges. He prohibits our passing by spitting Deku nuts, but we're able to stop the pesky scrub by reflecting one of these projectiles back at him with our new shield. The scrub is extremely apologetic, as he didn't mean to accost anyone, and the Deku nuts that he spat were the result of being overly nervous trying to interact with the people of the city. He apologizes profusely and heads on home to his cave. With the way reopened, we finally make it to the castle grounds. The Prime Minister is relieved to see Zelda and grateful for the delivery of the sword that is to be presented to the tournament winner. It appears we arrive just in the nick of time, as the minister is at that moment preparing the presentation ceremony. Zelda rushes off to get ready for the ceremony, but not before thanking us for going to the festival with her. The minister invites us to stay for the ceremony, and we accept, eager to see the pomp and circumstance take place in the gorgeous palace courtyard. In short order, we see 4 guards bearing halberds, carrying out a large golden chest with a glowing sword enshrined in the lid. The chest is easily large enough to contain a grown man, and the sword stabbed in the top glows with an otherworldly light from its shining blade and purple hilt. As the guards set the chest on the ground, the Prime Minister explains that the sword is the fabled Picori blade, used by the ancient hero to seal away evil long, long ago. As a reward for winning the tournament, the victor is allowed to touch the sacred blade and is presented with the smith's sword. At that moment, the king and the princess exit the castle, ready to preside over the ceremony. The minister calls for the champion, a man named Vati, to come forth and approach the blade. From the other end of the courtyard, we see a gray-skinned man in dark purple robes approach the chest. His demeanor is smug and confident, his stride quick and purposeful. His long white hair flows unbound, and his golden circlet, which adorns his hat, catches in the bright sun. Overall, he's the strangest looking man we've ever seen, and a sense of unease settles over the proceedings as he approaches. Once he gets close enough, he laughs out loud to himself, saying that he never thought things would go so well. He seems equally thrilled to see the chest containing the sealed evil as he is to see the blade, and loudly claims to the assembled guards and royalty that he plans to relieve us of the chest's contents. With his evil intention clear, the guards form up to protect the treasures of the kingdom, but are swiftly cast aside by evil magic that Vati summons to his aid. As the last of the guards is vanquished, a ball of lightning that Vati created strikes the Picori blade and shatters the sacred sword. As the sword breaks, the chest flies open, and a host of monstrous spirits rush out and begin swirling in the air, creating a powerful whirlwind. The king and the prime minister are thrown aside, but we use our shield to protect us from the worst of the effects. We see out of the corner of our eye a bright, pure golden light emanating from the princess, and as she approaches the swirling vortex of creatures, it dissipates, scattering in all directions. Vati is perplexed by this, but surmises that the power that was gifted to the people of Hyrule still flows within the veins of the ladies of its royal family. While we aren't sure what that means, Vati's intentions to harm Zelda are clear, as he summons a dark, swirling ball of energy in his hands. We jump in front of Zelda, raising our shield to protect her as best we can from this powerful and malevolent sorcerer. He shouts, "To stone with you!" and throws the ball of energy, which passes right through us and hits Zelda. As soon as the ball of swirling darkness hits us, we're thrown to the side, and our entire body goes limp with excruciating pain. As we lay on the ground, fighting unconsciousness, we hear Vati's frustration as he looks into the now empty chest. Apparently, he was expecting to find some hidden power in there, instead of just a rabble of monsters. Before he magically teleports away, he exclaims that he knows the force he is looking for is out in the world somewhere, and he will continue his search for it. With the courtyard empty, we finally slip into the dark embrace of unconsciousness. We awaken in a comfortable bed that is not our own, torn from sleep by the horrible memories of our encounter with Vati. As we get out of bed, a woman nearby, obviously a nurse, expresses her relief that we've finally woken up. She tells us that Master Smith is here in the castle as well, and we should head down to see him and the king at once. We leave the bedroom and make our way to the throne room, where we see the king, the prime minister, and a company of soldiers lined up before the throne. Next to the king's throne is a stone statue with the likeness of the princess, and we realize with horror that it is the princess. Vati's magic has cursed her and transformed her into a statue. Master Smith sees us and expresses his concern before the king begins to address the soldiers. He confirms that the rumors they have heard are true, and Vati has cursed Princess Zelda. He says that if we had the Picori blade, we would likely be able to break the curse forthwith. But with the blade broken, our only hope is to find the Picori and ask them to restore the blade. He reveals that the Picori are no mere legend and that they live deep within the Minish woods. The Prime Minister is startled and says that they should send the soldiers to the woods at once. But the king says that the Picori do not reveal themselves to anyone but children, and since they are so small, the soldiers would never be able to find them if they chose to remain hidden. Our grandfather offers up our services to find the Picori, and the king agrees to this plan, on the condition that we are fully recovered. The king gives us the smith's sword to protect ourselves against the monsters that have been unleashed on the world, and charges us to take the broken blade to be reforged by its original makers. Lastly, the king charges the soldiers to scour the land for Vati, and if they should find him, bring him to justice at once. Before we leave the throne room, the king tells us that the best place to start is to find the Deepwood Shrine, which was used in ancient times as a meeting place between the Picori and the royal family of Hyrule. With parting words from our grandfather and the gift of a map of Hyrule, we set out to find the Minish Woods, deep in the southeastern part of Hyrule. The trip doesn't take very long, even though we have to detour around the castle town due to the debris that was shaken loose when Vati released the monsters from the sealed chest. However, during the trip through Lon Lon Ranch and beyond, we encounter many monsters that have never before plagued the land during our lifetime. It seems that the king's warning about the dangers was apt, and that the chaos Vati unleashed is already swarming across the land. The Minish Woods are no exception to this, as the ancient-feeling woodlands teem with chews and octoroks. After a brief investigation into the woods, we hear a loud cry for help and rush back to find the person in need. Instead of a person, we see a green hat-like creature with the beak of a crow, shrieking in pain as two Octoroks pelt it with rocks. We decide to aid the beleaguered oddity, and after it screams at us rather rudely, we eliminate the two monsters bullying the hat creature. After some hemming and hawing about how it could have handled them, the creature asks what we're doing in the woods all alone. We tell the story of Vati's curse and the broken blade, and the creature becomes very interested in our tale. It tells us that we have a lot in common, as it too is on a quest to break one of Vati's curses. He finally introduces himself as Eslo, and says that we have found ourselves a companion, and whether we wanted a companion or not, it seems Eslo is along for the ride. As we turn to leave the clearing, Eslo continues to caw out at us for moving too fast, no matter how slowly we proceed. Finally, the grumpy hat has had enough and jumps onto our head, securing himself a perch on our unruly blonde locks, and thereby ensuring we can't leave him behind. Eslo has quite a few disparaging comments about our youth and supposed naivete, but honestly, we're sort of glad to have the company in this dark wood. As we continue our exploration, looking for the Picori, we come across a tree stump with a hole in the center, and Eslo stops us in our tracks. He tells us that the world of the Minish is very small, and at our confused look tells us that the proper name for the Picori is actually the Minish, which is why the wood is called the Minish Woods. In order to properly meet the Minish, we must become as small as they are, and this stump is a magical portal that will allow us to do just that. Eslo can help us utilize the portal, so we stand on the stump and wait as he sings a magical spell in a strange language. Before we know it, the world around us grows to immense size, and we're falling through the air into the gaping maw of the stump. Luckily, some handy mushrooms are there to cushion our fall, and we land on the soft ground of the forest floor, unharmed but minuscule in size. The feeling of seeing everything from this reduced size is disorienting in the extreme, but Eslo assures us that we can return to normal anytime we want by utilizing the portal again. He also warns us of the many dangers of being Minish-sized, such as puddles becoming impassable pools of water. We proceed through the forest, marveling at our surroundings from our new vantage point. Acorns, twigs, leaves, and blades of grass are all as large or larger than we are now, transforming the woods into a layered forest of incalculable size. We pass through a small log that has a tiny hole through the middle, much smaller than any human of any age would be able to use. On the other side, we see some lily pads making a circuit in a puddle, and use them to float safely to dry ground on the other side. On this side of the puddle, we find and enter the fabled village of the Minish. The idyllic village is lush with clover and thistle and strawberries, and the buildings are almost all cast-off junk from humans, like old boots or barrels. As we marvel at our surroundings, 5 small creatures in green clothes and red hats approach us warily. The tiny Minish chatter amongst themselves in a strange language before darting off in fear. Eslo pipes up and surmises that they haven't seen a human in quite a while, and explains that the language they were speaking is the Minish language. He suggests looking around the village for someone who might understand our own language and who might be able to help. We explore the minute village with wonder, stopping in at every house we can find, but to no avail. Even the grand house in the north of the village, whose sole denizen is an old and wise-looking Minish elder, contains no help for us in our search for assistance. Finally, a structure that looks like a palace made of crystal houses the person we need to see. Festari, the village scholar, recognizes us as a human and tells us in our own tongue that we can use a jabbernut to magically learn the Minish language. He tells us to go to the barrel house just south of the temple to find one, so we head there at once. After consuming the jabbernut, the Minish language is indeed perfectly understandable, so we waste no more time and walk over to the Minish elder's house at once. The elder is surprised but pleased to see a human in their village after so long, and offers their hospitality to us. Eslo pipes up and thanks the elder, but explains that we have no time to rest as we need to repair the broken Picori blade in order to break several curses of dark magic. The elder knows exactly what needs to be done to reforge the blade, blade and instructs us to gather the 4 mystic elements of the world, which were used in the original forging of the sword so long ago. These elements are what gave the sword its unique power, and without it, it's just a normal blade. He marks the location of the 4 elements on our map and tells us that the element of Earth can be found in the Deepwood Shrine, directly to the north of this very village. Festari is currently watching over the entrance to the shrine, as it has become infested with monsters since Bati released the evil into the world. The Elder commands us to return after we have found the Earth element, and he will help us on our next leg of the quest. We go back to the Crystalline Abbey and speak to Festari, who allows us to pass with another warning about the monsters in our path. The Deepwood Shrine is directly north of the village, and is a beautiful Minish structure that is designed to blend in with the wooded surroundings. The roof is covered with a live shrub, and the stone entrance is overgrown with well-tended bushes and flowers, giving the whole structure a very fey appearance that clashes with the warnings of the monsters that we have been given. We can tell that this place is sacred to the Minish, and the care they have given to its construction and maintenance is obvious. But at the same time, we can feel the ancient age of the stones around us. Entering the shrine, it seems that the Minish's care for the upkeep of the place only extends to the exterior of the building. The inside is dark and dank, and the walls are covered with spider webs and moss. Deeper into the shrine, we find a few of the enemies that we were warned about, in the form of slow-moving slugs and dangerous toadstools. The center of the dungeon contains a large barrel that appears to be designed to allow access to different parts of the shrine based on its orientation, and the orientation can be changed by spinning it like a hamster wheel from the inside. We use the barrel to keep exploring new paths in the shrine, looking for any clue to the whereabouts of the Earth element. We find some more enemies instead, and use some handy mushrooms to fling ourselves around the dungeon, over obstacles like bottomless chasms and deep water. With some handy small keys, we continue to dive deeper into the shrine, where we find more and more of the floor covered with the spores from the puffstools that slow our progress. Eventually, we find the room containing the source of all the webs around the shrine, as we find ourselves face to face with a giant Matterpillar. The creature is not too keen on our intrusion into its lair and tries to charge us immediately. We smack its nose with our sword, which stuns it, causing its spiked tail to retreat, revealing a weak spot that we can exploit. After a few hits, the Matterpillar continues its rampage once more until we can stun it again with a smack on the nose. A few more rounds of alternating hits between the nose and the tail, and the Matterpillar is destroyed once and for all. Its destruction reveals a useful item, the Gust Jar, which can suck up most anything in reach, including the webs on the walls and the spores on the floors. Using our new Gust Jar, we start cleaning house to see if anything useful is hidden behind the webs or under the spores. Many things show up in our investigation, from pieces of heart to switches that reveal chests containing rupees and secret seashells. But the main event is the ability to enter the bottom floor of the dungeon, where we find a canal of deep water with a lily pad boat that we can steer using the Gust Jar. This lily pad ferries us around the canal system until we find the key to the big boss room. We haven't found the boss room yet, but a handy portal takes us back to the entrance, where we can unblock the doorways that lead to the top floor of the shrine. Here we find the door to the boss room and enter to see what monster guards the treasure we seek. As we enter the room, green jelly-like goo starts raining from the ceiling of the chamber, covering the floor with slime. As we watch the goo fall, it coalesces into an enormous green chew, complete with its normal stupid-looking grin. Normally, this guy would be a simple pest that we could deal with easily, but in our current shrunken size, the chew looks as big as a house, and moves incredibly fast over large portions of ground. Slightly terrified, we nonetheless join battle with this dopey foe. The chew is immune to the swing of our sword, and its immense size bypasses our small shield, so we spend the first bout of the battle trying not to get squashed by the giant foe. Unsure if it's the right thing to do or not, we pull out the Gust Jar and start sucking away at the chew's gooey base. As we continue to suck, the puddle of slime acting as the Chew's feet begins to shrink rapidly, until the Chew becomes unsteady and begins to wobble, ready to fall. When it topples to the ground, we run to its head and start slashing away with furious abandon. The Chew doesn't die, but we can tell that it was hurt by our attacks this time. As it recovers, it begins to leap around the room, trying to land on us and crush us with its weight. We have to run frantically around the room until it comes to rest and we can suck up its slimy base once more. With 2 more rounds of sword slashes to its head, the Chew is finally destroyed and explodes in a blaze of gooey, slimy mess. In its wake, the Chew leaves a heart container, and more importantly, the element of earth descends from the top of the shrine for us to take possession of. The purple crystalline object is hefty in our hands and feels as solid and ancient as the land itself. It thrums with life and power, and we can tell that its magic is more powerful than anything we have beheld in our lives so far. With the first element in our grasp, we walk to the portal that will take us out of the Deepwood Shrine. The quest we have found ourselves thrust into has been a non-stop adventure full of danger and strange magic, but we know that we must persevere if we are to break the curse on Zelda. Hopefully the Minish Elder can indeed reforge the Sword of Legend, and maybe we can even reseal the evil that Vati unleashed upon the land. Only time will tell, and we have 3 more elements to track down before we can put our hopes to the test.
Well done, as always, Matt. Let's get into part 2, which is our takes, where we talk about this section of the game and how it made us feel. All right, Matt, I'm going to throw it to you first. Give me some first impressions on The Legend of Zelda, The Minish Cap. Timeline first, before you do that.
Yes, timeline. So timeline is really interesting. This is one of the few games that takes place prior to Ocarina of Time. This is, I think, canonically the game that happens closest in line to Skyward Sword. So it's way pre Ocarina of Time. So it occurs in all timelines. Yay! Minish Cap.
It's cool. It really is cool. It's one of those things where now more than ever, I'm feeling very sympathetic with some of the quotes that Max was dropping from Eiji Onuma and Hidemaru Fujibayashi's Tears of the Kingdom interview. We've been talking about that interview, which you can actually check on IGN right now, written by the wonderful Kat Bailey. Great interview. It covers a wide variety of topics about Tears of the Kingdom, but also touches on the series, or the people who are currently in charge of the series, and how they feel about the timeline, right?
And how they basically like acknowledge it tangentially, but don't let it affect any of their game decisions.
Yeah, and we've been talking about that a lot in the Discord the last few days. Of course, I'm one of those people, I've said this on the show before, I'm one of those people who is totally comfortable thinking of the timeline in kind of like a fun, offhand sort of way, but I try not to get too, twisted up into a pretzel about like where things lay specifically. I think it's just more fun if you have it as some context, but at the end of the day, it's just like, it's The Legend of Zelda. It's got, repeating snippets of similar story that echo over the ages, and it's a good time, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so by that same token, knowing that Minish Cap is stated by Hyrule Historia to be a prequel basically to Ocarina of Time is interesting context, I guess. I just don't know how much it really matters, or how much it really even feels like that's the case. You could have told me that this game existed in pretty much any timeline at any point on those timelines, and I would have believed you.
It would work because it's a very self-contained little adventure. Yeah. You don't have any Triforce stuff. You don't have any Master Sword. You don't have any like lore connecting it to anything. There's no Ganondorf. There's no Ganon. There's no Sacred Realm. It's just its own little thing. Yeah, and that's super fun.
It's notable for being what is essentially a side adventure to the main thread of the Legend of Zelda plot, but taking place within Hyrule.
Yeah, and it does draw direct lines to Four Swords and Four Swords Adventures, because Vati, who is our villain of this game, is also the main villain of both of those games.
Yes, and we're basically seeing that character's origin story here, right? Is what I'm understanding.
Yep. And so it's really cool to kind of be able to connect those three games specifically loosely in whatever way you can. So I think it's fun to have the kind of a little side tangent of the Zelda timeline over here, where you're like, Minish Cap, Four Swords and Four Swords Adventures are all over here. Yay!
Yeah, exactly. A weird little spot in the Zelda timeline, right? But I do think that if you're adhering strictly to the timeline and you just live and die by that, you're one of those fans. And I'm not knocking it, by the way. Like, we know these people, it's fine. I respect it. If you are one of those people who really sticks closely to the timeline, this is a nice place to have a game, because the era between Skyward Sword and Ocarina of Time could be so unimaginably vast.
Thousands of years. Like, literally, you could just insert number here, and you could probably just be like, yeah, that tracks.
Sure.
Yeah, no one's going to argue with you about it.
Yeah, exactly. So, totally comfortable, operating under that basis for the narrative of this game.
Yeah. So going further into first impressions, like, right out of the gate, this game just sets the tone of like fun. We're here, and it's going to be a fun adventure. It's going to be upbeat. The color palette is very bright. The sprites are all very like Pokemon. What was the first colorized Pokemon game? It wasn't Gold or Silver.
Okay, so
I think it was Ruby or Sapphire, maybe.
Sorry.
It was around that era.
No, it depends how you quantify it. So Gold and Silver and Crystal, Pokemon Crystal did release on the Game Boy Color and had a wider color palette than some of the older ones. It was still an 8-bit game. Let me put some more specific terminology to what you're talking about right now.
Yes, please.
So Minish Cap is one of only two 16-bit Zelda titles, the other being A Link to the Past. So
that's why it looks so familiar.
Yeah. So the Super NES and the Game Boy Advance were 16-bit systems. And so they, obviously, this is the aesthetic that is kind of, especially an era of indie game development starting about 10 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people trying to home in on this specific aesthetic, right? The 16-bit art style. A lot of developers try to go back even further and hit that 8-bit style. But I, in my own personal sampling of like people trying to hit retro aesthetic, it tends to be more in this area. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is because you can get a lot of that retro feel, right? The pixel art, sprites, limited color palettes and whatnot, but you've got a little bit more color and complexity to work with than you do on an 8-bit game. And, you can kind of, at least when 16-bit was a necessary format, how am I trying to say this? So nowadays, if a developer tries to go for a 16-bit aesthetic, they can kind of pair whatever sort of soundtrack they want up to it, right? Because then it's just an aesthetic and tone choice. But 16-bit consoles had notably better audio capabilities as well. And so that's, And so I think one of the reasons that Minish Cap is feeling so familiar to you is because it is, like, obviously it's a very different style and it's doing more and offering more complexity than A Link to the Past had, but it's got a similar range of stuff to work with.
The buildings look familiar. They have kind of a similar design aesthetic. Specifically like the shrubs and the trees and the grass, all of that looks almost identical, just colorized.
And the music feels super Nintendo, right?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And that's one thing that really hit me right out of the gate as well. After the brief text intro, Zelda's walking into the Master Smith's house, and just the combo of Zelda's lullaby plus a fun little overarching theme that it has going on. Mm-hmm. That was like immediately unique and cool and like upbeat and fun. And then we continue that when we get into Hyrule Castletown during the festival, and that is just like a jaunty, fun theme. Everything is colorful. It's lively. There's tons of people milling about. Everyone's like, the atmosphere that is communicated is so effective in being like, oh yeah, like I'm smiling playing this game. Like, this is really cool. And this is really fun.
I think that this game, the first impression that I'm really getting, so you're hitting on it a lot with, talking about it as like a very cheerful feeling game.
Yes.
Minish Cap to me up front feels much more like a just straight up fairy tale than a lot of Zelda games do.
Yeah.
Right?
I agree.
Some of that is the content, right? Miniature people who live in the forest, right?
They're little fairies that like come to good children and make them happy.
Yeah, the Keebler elves, right?
Yeah. And then the Minish themselves are like, we live to make humans happy. That's how we survive.
We live in trees making cookies. Like, okay, cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I'm here for that.
Thank you. But anyway, yeah, so it's just a very bright and upbeat sort of story. And even when things start going sideways in the plot, right, it's still not a dark game at any point. Sure. Like it's still pretty bright and cheery. It's so fun because it's interesting to me seeing what is possible when somebody sets out to be like, we want to adapt the art style of the Wind Waker using 16-bit pixel graphics, right?
Interesting.
I think that's probably a little reductive, right? Because the Wind Waker art style has got a lot more, a much more distinctive look to it, especially in terms of things like architecture and world design and whatnot. It's a little bit more just Japanese, right? And that's not something that's really adapted here. But this was a game that was, at least in its promotional art and its official artwork, the box art and posters and marketing and all that, very much tying it into Wind Waker Link's appearance. And that was something that continued for quite a while after this game. But, Wind Waker was the main Zelda title out at the time when this game released.
Because this came out before Twilight Princess.
Yes. Yeah. By like a year and a half, 2 years.
Something like that.
So
and I think that's most noticeable in the design of the King of Hyrule. One of the few times we actually see the king, he's basically wearing the same outfit as King of Red Lions.
Yeah.
The big robe with the white collar and the crown. Like he's very King of Red Lions, King Bosphorus. Excuse me, Hyrule.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting to note that there's a hobby crowd out there on the internet who likes to basically try to make their own Zelda games, essentially.
That's fun.
And I know that the graphics and the sprite sheets and everything from Minish Cap are one of the more popular options for people trying to assemble their own little Zelda game, right? Because I can understand why, if you're going for something that captures the Zelda feel, but you don't have a AAA budget to work with, then of course you're going to probably try and go to top down as your main option, right? And if you're trying to make your own top down Zelda game and you don't want to create all of your own graphics and stuff and artwork from scratch, then you pull from what you have, and Minish Cap's art style is probably the most easily replicatable version of that, right?
Absolutely.
Like any top-down Zelda game after this, now you're into 3D modeling and all those sorts of, like even Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, and then into A Link Between Worlds, right? You wouldn't be able to just like recreate those easily in Photoshop and then just tile them in like a game maker, and so. It does make me a little sad that this was the only Zelda game that came out in this style. Like,
I would love another Zelda game in this style. This is really great. And I think we talked about this in A Link to the Past season as well. Is like 16-bit just works. It's timeless in its own way. It's charming. It's familiar. It hits strong nostalgia chords with a certain crowd. Even me, and I didn't grow up in 16-bit era.
Yeah.
But like it hits a nostalgia chord in me, and like it's powerful, and it's a good visual medium that works really well.
We talked about this a lot in the Phantom Hourglass season about how there was just this period of time where these sorts of pixel graphics were considered to be outdated. And so there was a preference to move on to 3D models and stuff. No matter how good or bad they looked, you just had to be doing 3D.
And the prime example of this was A Link Between Worlds. And we hated that art style. It was horrible. This is infinitely better. Infinitely better.
Yeah. Yep, completely agree. So anyway, pour one out for what could have been if we had a little bit more of this. But it's great that we have this. One other quick thing to note, I think we've mentioned this in previous seasons for sure. But this is the first Zelda game that we have played that was not primarily developed by Nintendo.
Capcom.
Yeah, Capcom was the main developer of this game. Nintendo licensed out the Legend of Zelda rights to Capcom, who then developed a series of top-down games. This was actually the third one that they did in that series. The first two were the Oracle games, Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages. So,
which we'll get to eventually.
yeah. And, it's interesting because I do think that there are some choices that are made in this game, not choices that I dislike. I don't think these are bad things, but I do think you can kind of tell that this was a game developed by not the core Nintendo team, right?
Why do you say that?
So there's a few little things. One, I was noticing a lot of newer types of enemies, right? Like enemy types that you don't see a lot in other Zelda games,
Like the little mole people?
Yeah, exactly. The music has kind of a different approach than a lot of Zelda soundtracks do. I really, really like the music a lot.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like it comes from the same house as A Link to the Past or Link's Awakening or, any of these other ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
It definitely feels like it has its own identity and like it was a different group of people that were making it. There's just I'll try to keep a running list of these little differences as I'm playing the game, and then I can speak to them in a bit more concrete fashion. But it's one of those things where it's like this is in arrangement very familiar as a top-down Zelda game.
Yeah, it's interesting that you call it that the music is a little bit different. So the composer is, I'm going to butcher this, Mitsuhiko Takano, and he's done all of the Resident Evil games. And Marvel vs. Capcom, so the arcade games.
Yeah.
I think this is his only Zelda credit. He did not do either of the Oracle games.
Yeah, the Oracle games also use a lot. To my recollection, the Oracle games rely a lot on the sound design for Link's Awakening because the Oracle games are both 8-bit and they reuse the sprites and stuff.
You know what this is? This is very Mega Man.
Oh, yeah.
And he did a lot of the Mega Man games.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm following it now.
So, yeah, anyway, there's a fun blending of talent here, right? Where it's like you've got people working on this game who are very accomplished and who have done a lot of really recognizable, wonderful games that are not Zelda. And now they're here working on a Zelda game. And so, mission accomplished. This feels like Zelda to me, but also has shades of other things, which is fun. So I think just a few things off the top. One, this version of Hyrule feels smaller than I remembered. This is a pretty condensed little world map.
Yeah, it's in I think it's like a 4x3 grid, so it's like 12 overall spaces. I agree that it feels small, but the spaces, some of the spaces that you enter and move around in feel big when you get into them.
Yeah.
And some of them feel much bigger than other spaces. So you have to travel through the main area at the far south, which is Link's house, or the Smith's house, up through a little section of Hyrule Field into Hyrule Castle Town, which feels really big to me. Yeah. It feels big. It feels lived in. It feels populated. Feels much more populated than Twilight Princess's Castle Town to me in a more positive way.
Yeah.
It feels like the best iteration of Hyrule Castle Town in any top-down Zelda game that I can think of.
Does any other top-down Zelda game have a Hyrule Castle Town?
Doesn't A Link Between Worlds have a castle town?
No, it just has Kakariko Village.
Oh, is this the only Hyrule Castle Town in a top-down Zelda?
I think it is, yeah.
Well, it feels really great, and I like it.
Yeah.
Cool.
I agree. The hustle and bustle is really well communicated here. The portrayal of a town that's in the middle of a festival is
really fun.
It's really fun. It's very successful. There's a lot of really fun story beats that are happening in and around here, right? After we meet up with Zelda, and we have the fun thing, the fun beat of learning that Zelda and Link are childhood friends here.
Yeah, I was about to say, let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love that it's a small enough kingdom, apparently, that the Smith's son is childhood best friends with the royal princess. And they're so close that she sneaks out of the castle away from the prime minister to go hang out with Link and take him to the festival with her.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
Which actually, this feels like for people who were looking for this really does feel like it fits between Skyward Sword and Ocarina of Time, right? this feels good because you get the impression of a kingdom that is not as vast as it will one day become, right?
Where everybody knows everybody more or less.
Yeah, it's like it's one step further from just being a colony of people who came down from the sky, right?
Yeah,
but
totally.
it's still not like a
5-person
power,
village.
you know? Yeah.
So it's somewhere between a 5-person village and a massive kingdom.
Exactly.
Overall,
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's really fun. Like it's really fun seeing the Master Smith, who's apparently Link's grandfather, that's kind of hinted at later, is like super close with the royal family and super well respected in the community. Everybody knows who Link is, and they all seem to like him. And even the king talks to him by name, and is like, it's just a very close knit kind of community that feels fun and feels lived in. Just with very little introduction, very brief, but it feels lived in and it feels natural.
Yeah, definitely. I had a lot of fun walking around the festival just talking to NPCs.
Did you talk to like almost everybody? Yeah, I talked to way more people than normal.
I'm sure I missed one or two, but I think I got most everyone.
Yeah. It was fun to hear the different versions of the story of the Pickery.
Yeah.
And like the old man who's talking to all the children. He says, now remember, be good children so the Pickery will come visit you and leave you treats.
So here's our first phonetics discussion of the season. I have always pronounced this Picori.
Really?
Yeah.
I say Pickery, and I don't know why, but
I doubt that there's like a common, like an accepted correct way to say this, right? Because it's all in text bubbles, and
right.
Like the way that it's spelled, it really could be either.
Well, I'm gonna look it up, because there's probably a phonetics thing in there. Anyway, keep going.
Anyway, yeah. So I've always said Picori, but yeah. So it's this section, if you're talking to NPCs, is doing a really good job at establishing the foundational lore of this game, right? About the hidden tribe of magical people who saved Hyrule from a very dark past. Which is something that we already knew a little bit about, right? Because we got the intro, the story dump when you load into the game, right? Where you get the, which I just want to say, so the whole base story here, that Hyrule was a world infested by monsters, and then the Picori gave them a magical sword, and a hero appeared who wielded the magical sword and sealed the darkness away using it, and now the sword is like revered, right? Great story, super cool. We got a lot of overlap with the Master Sword here, right?
yeah. Sealing away an ancient evil with the Pickery sword, and I realize I call it the Pickery sword because it's like a piccolo. So Pickery, Okay. So it just, I don't know. That's kind of how I got there. Anyway. But like yet another example of sealing away bad things instead of just like eliminating them.
To the point where I remember very vividly the first time that I ever played this game, I was getting a little confused in that introductory cutscene about whether or not this was supposed to be the Master Sword, and they were just calling it something different. Right.
That tracks, yeah.
And especially because we have the added component of a hero appeared from the sky or whatever.
And the Pickery granted him a blade that sealed the evil. And
it's clearly a link, right? Yeah. And so we've got this whole other hero being mentioned here that's never appeared in any Zelda game before. But the thing is, it's like, again, if we're taking the Zelda timeline on the basis of like echoes of events happening across time, this is pretty much the story of Skyward Sword Link.
Basically,
right?
Yeah, for sure. Especially because the Pickery came down from the sky and gave him the sword.
Right.
And when you find out later that the Minish don't live in the sky, they definitely live in the forest, but okay, sure.
So how many tribes of magical beings do we now have that like come from the sky and are like omnipotent in the we've got the Uka, we've got the Picori, we've got the Zonai,
and we have the ancient Hylians.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's kind of a lot.
The sky above Hyrule is really crowded, is what I'm saying. Like very crowded.
It goes through a lot of changes.
It does.
It's really funny.
But yeah, definitely a fun little story here. You know, knowing the base mechanic of this game, that it involves Link shrinking.
Yeah.
And the world being divvied up into two basically planes of play, right? Like the big one and then the smaller one. Mm-hmm. It is really fun in this early part of the game, looking at buildings and structures and just being like, oh, I think that's like
I can go in there.
I think I can go in there later.
Yeah. That's going to be fun. Yeah. No, it's and it's also really cool because they take this small map and they double it in size by making you smaller and having to traverse it in a different way. So it's really good, efficient use of game space and game design.
That's one of the reasons the world doesn't feel too small. Like earlier, I said that this is a very condensed feeling Hyrule. And when you're just looking at it on your world map, yes, it is. But one reason that it doesn't actually feel like that is because, like you're saying, we're essentially doubling up on space here, which is really great. I think that that's a genius use of the game world and the play space. But we'll get to that a little bit more here in just a bit. So anyway, we make it through the festival, and Zelda basically takes us along. We're going to be witnesses to this yearly ceremony that happens in Hyrule, where the winner of a combat tournament gets to, I guess, look at the Picori blade.
Yeah, they get to touch it for some reason.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I get it. It's like a sacred icon, so it'd be kind of like someone being able to touch the shroud. What's that shroud that's supposedly laid over Jesus's body? I
don't know what it's called, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, basically like someone got to go, even better. Someone gets to go touch the Pope's scepter.
Okay, right.
Like, yeah. That would be a big deal for a Catholic.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, honestly, that'd be a big deal for pretty much anyone who has an appreciation for world events and like powers. Like, that'd be pretty. I'm not Catholic, and that would be cool.
I'd poke that scepter.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I would assume a sufficiently like reverent demeanor.
You mean you wouldn't go up and go boop on the Pope's scepter? You wouldn't boop the Pope's scepter?
I would not.
That's probably for the best. No. You might get stoned.
I'm not here looking to make enemies of the Vatican.
Yeah, that sounds like a dangerous thing to do.
Yeah.
No, it's cool. I wish we'd gotten to see the tournament. Like, they talk a lot about the tournament, and Zelda's like, oh, there's a sword tournament, and the blade you have is a reward for the winner, and like, I was like, oh, cool. Do we get to see that? No, it's already done. So that would have been kind of neat to see the sword tournament, but, small qualm.
Yeah, I agree. So at this point in the story, enter Vati, who, look, I love the design of this character. Having this person walk in and be purple is just pretty much immediately reads as like, oh, you're the bad guy.
Oh, you're dark. You're a bad sorcerer. Like, purple with white hair and a black or a dark purple Link hat. You're like, oh, it's like Dark Link, maybe, sort of, like, kind of.
Exactly. And so anyway, Vati clearly here possessing a lot of power just from jump, right? Like, we know that Vati is
pretty wild,
is a powerful swordsman, right? But the ease with which Vati kind of steals the Picori blade from its from the chest, right? Is definitely sets a tone here, right? Little instant big danger vibes.
The cool thing about this to me, sorry, I keep interrupting you, but one of the cool things is Vati won the tournament, the sword tournament, without using magic, supposedly, because like if he had used sorcery to win it, they would have not let him anywhere near the Picori blade. Probably would have tried to arrest him or something.
Right.
But so he's apparently a very talented swordsman on top of being a powerful sorcerer, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I agree. I really like a lot of the official artwork of Vati when you go and look at the concept art for the character. Like just a really cool design. I mean, red eyes, purple skin, black cloak, very clearly evil. Not quite as goofy looking as like a Yuga, for instance.
Definitely not goofy looking like Yuga, yes.
But definitely not feeling like a retread of anything Ganondorf adjacent either. Like a very different feeling villain, which is nice because, this is one thing we were talking about a lot last season in regards to Zant, just how fun it is to kind of have a different villain. And obviously, much to our chagrin, Zant did not end up being the main villain of Twilight Princess, but Vati is the main villain of this game. And I'm really excited for that. I'm excited to have a character that the story can be entirely devoted to, from a bad guy standpoint, and just see how that unfolds and see what the story is there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tragic to see Zelda relegated to literally a stone statue yet again.
Yeah, I have a feeling she spends the entire game this way.
I'm pretty sure she does. Yes.
Okay.
So
why, Zelda? You deserve so much better. I really like this version of Zelda too. Like, it's so cruel to tease us with a Zelda that has an actual relationship with Link, and like within the boundaries of what you can do in a top-down game with text bubbles, right? I liked their relationship. It was fun and cute, and they were friends, and it was nice.
They feel like those those kids who are in like middle school, maybe freshman year of high school, a boy and a girl who grew up together and just have a comfortable friendship that isn't like weirdly filled with sexual tension yet.
Right.
And like and they're just like comfortable with each other and just enjoy each other's company and having fun. And not only that, but she has a cool moment where her inborn magic abilities kind of dispel.
You almost just said her inbred.
I did almost say inbred. Inborn magical abilities kind of dispel the darkness of Vati's magic at least initially. And that was really cool to see just a brief glimpse of the power that this Zelda has.
Yeah, so there was a little bit of text that was attributed to why Zelda was able to do this. Vati says something like, clearly the power of the Picori is still found in the bloodline
of
of
the women of the royal family. I'm unclear how that plays into the game.
Notably not Triforce adjacent at all.
Yes, notably not. But still very canonical to Zelda's power in general, purifying, sealing powers that are inborn to the royal family.
Yeah, so honestly, at this point, this is one of those things where...
Innate. There
you go. This is one of those things where the Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom interpretation of inherited power and abilities by these main characters is kind of just more what this series is shifting to the longer that it goes on, right? Mm-hmm. At this point, I mean, even in 2004, we're very clearly now in a world where it's not tied specifically to the Triforce. Like the Triforce abilities and the extent to which they do or do not live within the souls of Zelda and Link and Ganon is kind of neither here nor there. There are inherited powers and proficiencies that are just sort of passed down through those lines that are just hereditary, right? And I kind of like that. I like that these characters have they have that level of ability sort of regardless of whether or not the Triforce is present in the story.
Yeah, that's fair. Which is interesting because we kind of do away with some of that in Skyward Sword later, where it goes back to being like a reincarnation thing born with the actual Triforce.
But not even necessarily, because this could very much be like in Skyward Sword. I think the bigger deal was much more that the spirit of the goddess was living within the bloodline of the princess, right?
Got it.
And so if you're kind of taking that to be mostly where the source of Zelda's power comes from through the ages, then it works kind of no matter what, right?
Sure. Okay. Fair enough. We've done all that. Zelda's back is encased in stone, most likely for the rest of the game. R.I.P. And then we're moving on into, all right, well, now Link, your adventure is to restore the Picori Blade so that you can seal away the magic. And it has to be Link because the Picori only show themselves to children. And so none of the soldiers can go tramping through the Minish Woods to find them. So, Link, you go off and do it, which is a pretty good world-building explanation for why you send a child to do the work of a trained soldier or swordsman. So I think that works well. And then we kind of go through a little bit of Hyrule. We go through the Lon Lon Ranch section of Hyrule, which is kind of cool that exists.
Yeah.
And then into the Minish Woods. And
so can I say one thing real quick, just as far as music is concerned? Let's talk about one or two of the musical themes that we've heard here. So, okay. Well, specifically about the woods, right?
Yeah.
But there's one that popped up earlier that I wanted to mention.
Oh, yeah. Go.
Which is the only piece of music that I explicitly recognized. Well, I guess not the Hyrule Castle theme happens, right?
Mm-hmm. So that's Zelda's Lullaby.
Right. But anyway, so a lot of this music is new, right? Mm-hmm. Castletown and Minish Woods and all that. There was one piece of music that played in an earlier part of the game, and it was so familiar and it took me a minute to place it. It's the credits roll music from Ocarina of Time.
Where was that?
Okay, so yeah, it's the music that plays when you first wake up and you meet Zelda, and it is a really fun 16-bit soundtrack reorchestration of the Ocarina of Time credits roll music, of all things. It was just like, look, I love it. I love hearing it here. I mean, it gave me instant max nostalgia juice, which is fun. Weird place to pull it out, I guess, but like, yeah, it's got some fun like harp sort of sounds, and it feels very appropriate to Zelda the character. So that was a really fun piece of music to have crop up here. I think you had one that you really liked as well that we kind of get into now.
Yeah, so I was literally about to say is as you get into the Minish Woods, the soundtrack that plays there is really fun, and it is a unique piece of music that I don't think is a cue from anything else, but it is really, really good. I like this music a lot.
Yeah. And it's fun because it's not like there's a lot to it, right? It's basically just one looping snippet that kind of goes over and over, right? But it's very atmospheric, and it has this woodsy sort of feel to it, and I do really like it. I mean, it's just one of those things. Like, we talk about this all the time. To us, music is such an insta-win way to our hearts in a Zelda game, right?
Yeah.
And so when a game has its own distinct musical identity, that's basically always something that we appreciate. And
absolutely.
One of those reasons that Phantom Hourglass just didn't hit for us is like
no new music.
It didn't even really try all that hard. And yeah, Minish Cap has got that. And I can actually, The Woods is one that I really enjoy, and there's a few that are coming up in future episodes that I can just remember off the top of my head that I'm just like, yeah, this game's got really good music, honestly. Yeah. I like it.
And the Hyrule Castletown theme was also really good. It was not a retread of the normal Hyrule Castletown. It was unique and upbeat and charming and fun and fairy tale, and the game right out of the gate has great music, and it reuses some old things but has mostly new and unique themes that work really well.
You know what I love about the Minish Woods?
What do you love about the Minish Woods?
To me, this feels like a really good top-down translation of what the Faron Woods felt like in Skyward Sword.
Oh, yeah, I think that's fair. I didn't really make that connection, but I like that a lot. To me, it felt like a Lost Woods that hadn't become the Lost Woods yet. Like, it's still young, it's still new.
Yeah.
It hasn't become the
creepy,
semi-haunted.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I was envisioning, but I think the Faron Woods works as well.
Yeah. And so it's not very long before we meet this game's companion character. We save Eslo the Hat from an attack by some Octoroks who are really just letting him have it. Like,
they're just bam, 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 bam. Like, poor Eslo. He's really getting hammered by those Octoroks.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
So save Eslo, and this is something that I think is just so clever, right? Like, how do you have a companion character in a top-down Zelda game, right? You don't want to devote the screen space to having another character who's following you at all times, right? Because you just don't have the room, right? In a top-down game, that character would get in the way all the time of you trying to do combat and whatnot. So what's the solution? You just stick him on your head.
You attach him to the character, and we get a really grumpy, cranky hat. And honestly, Eslo's funny to me. He's kind of comic relief, but he's also super grumpy. And I like Eslo. He's fun.
I like Eslo a lot. It's like you're taking your cranky uncle with you on your adventure, right? And so, I really do like this. I like how when you're walking around, it just looks like the normal Link hat. But in sections where Eslo wants to talk to you, you get the sprite work where his like bill comes up and you can see the little
squawking. He's squawking at you. Yeah.
So,
and Link always turns to face the camera whenever Eslo does that. So you get Link's like looking up, kind of cockeye at his head, like trying to see who's talking to him. It's fun.
It's actually really impressive how like the range of expression that is happening in this game with somewhat limited resources, right? Like, it's still a pixel art game and there's not a whole lot of space to render like expressions and things, but I think it's pretty successful here. Like, this Link feels like he's got a fair amount of personality, and I like that.
Yeah, I think he's really well done. When Eslo attaches himself to your head, there's a little grunting, and Link's like, he's making all those little grunty noises.
Yeah.
And Eslo's like, stop struggling. And I was like, man, that's kind of weird, but all right.
Yeah.
And then you get the musical cue of like success, and you get kind of a swell, almost like when you get the Master Sword whenever you see Link with his hat, and it's like, oh, this is the origin of Link's hat.
Yeah.
And like it was fun. It was cool.
Yeah, totally agree. So we make our way to the Minish village at this point after shrinking for the first time, right? Eslo notices the stump and is like, oh, hey, so we can actually do something with this. And then we get the first example of getting shrunk down to Minish size in this game with there's a really fun little cutscene that happens when you do this every time, right? Like you shrink down and then you find yourself inside the stump with like the
bounce on some mushrooms.
It's so fun to me when you when you're at Minish size in this game, the level of detail that objects have, just because it's like, you know, now you've got the room and the space to make mushrooms and plants and leaves feel gigantic and monolithic, right? I really, really like the way that the miniature world is rendered. I think it's really, really fun.
Yeah, it's cool to see the acorns and the leaves and the various like objects that are just kind of thrown around, like the old boot that's a Minish house, and then the barrel, and like all of these things are rendered with really cool and charming detail. It feels fun. It feels like you're small, and it's kind of hard to translate size disparagement like that, or disparity like that. Yeah. And they do it really well. And the art, I feel like they spent a lot more time on the art for when you're small than they did necessarily on the time when you're big. Not to say the time when you're big is not artful or well done, but this like is another level of detail.
Well, and the struggle that I'm sure you have to do if you're trying to portray scale, right, is you've got to put that amount of effort into the scenery when you're small. Otherwise, it just doesn't translate. Like feeling like you're a tiny person in a big world, right? Like you've got to be able to tell that I'm walking over a giant, what is to me now like a giant leaf on the ground or something, right? Without those things, it just doesn't communicate the same way. But they did put in that effort. And it makes the whole thing so successful. Like it communicates exactly what it's trying to, which is that, you know, all these places you've been walking around as big adult Link, you know, this is what they would look like if you were an inch tall.
Yeah. And it's really fun. It's really cool. The Minish Village is also a really fun space. When you first come in and you have all the tiny, tiny Pickery, the Minish that are walking around with their little red hats, the Keebler elves. They literally are just like a copy and paste of what the Keebler elves look like.
Right.
And they're cute and fun, and they're all talking gibberish. And Eslo's like, well, they haven't seen a human in a really long time, and they don't speak your language, so maybe we should find someone that does.
I really like the design of the Minish.
Yeah, it's really fun.
They're cute.
Yeah, super cute. So that we go and we find some, I think he's like a priest. He's not the elder, because the elder is off in the corner. The guy who guards the Deepwood Shrine. I don't know if he's the minister or the priest or something, but
the shaman.
Sure.
The Minish shaman.
The mini shaman?
Yeah.
Yeah, the mini shaman. And he tells you, oh, go eat the jabbernut. And then you can speak our language, which, you know, sure, I'm down with it. Why not?
Cool.
Sure.
Yeah, why not? We're very trusting here. I will eat this strange nut, and it will solve all my problems.
And it does.
It does.
There you go. So now we can talk to all of them. They're all very surprised to see a human, and that's where we get the confirmation that, yes, the Minish do, in fact, survive off of giving human children joy. Like, that's how they exist. And they're like, yeah, but we always do it in secret, so no one knows that it's us. Like, I don't know. These feel very like fairy tale characters, like you said. It's really cool.
Yeah.
So we go do that and then talk to the elder, and he tells us that, in order to restore the Pickery Blade, we need the 4 primal elements of the world. And I'm going to mark on your map where you can find them. The element of earth you need to go find in the Deepwood Shrine, and just tell our shaman what you're doing, and he'll let you by. So then we go do that and enter our dungeon. Yeah. So I guess this is where we transition to dungeon.
So the whole pursuit here, as I understand it, is Vati destroyed the Pickery Blade. Now I'm saying Pickery. Vati destroyed the Pickery Blade, and in doing so, unsealed all of the evil things that were in the chest that the blade had locked away, right?
Yes.
Which is why there are now monsters in Hyrule Field.
Where
right?
previously there were no monsters, apparently,
right.
Which sounds pretty great.
So the notable thing here is that Vati apparently did not get what he wanted by doing this. I think he was looking for the essence of the Picori power, I think, like this an essence of light or something.
Sure.
He was looking for some kind of mystical empowerment. And he didn't get it. So now we're just left with the broken Picori blade. And I don't think at this point we're even necessarily looking for Vati, right? We're just trying to restore the blade so that we can lock the evil back up.
Yes, correct. And break the curse on Zelda.
Yes,
which was the other thing that the king said it would most likely do. And critically, that's also why Eslo joins us, is he's like, oh, you want to restore the Picori blade to break Vati's curse on Zelda? Well, maybe it'll break the curse on me because I wasn't always a hat. So, we're kind of getting a little bit of Eslo backstory there. And also he's looking to break the curse that Vati put on him. He knows who Vati is, but we don't get much more out of him at this point in the game.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, now we know where we have to go to find the element of Earth. It's in the Deepwood Shrine, which is a sacred place to the Minish. We're granted access to go here. And what I love about the Deepwood Shrine, just from an aesthetic standpoint, like from the outside.
Are we going into the...
No, we'll in a second. Yeah. I love the exterior of this place because it's got this it's got this fun mixture of like an actual architectural place that the Minish have built, right? But hidden just within like some ferns or something, it's nice. I really do like it.
It's in a shrubbery, Lyndon.
It's in a shrubbery. A shrubbery. Yeah. So we're getting now into discussion about the actual dungeon. Do we have anything else we want to say about our takes generally this section of the game before we get on to talking about the Deepwood Shrine itself?
I not really. I think the traversal of the larger space when you're a Minish and having to avoid things that you can easily traverse as large
puddles.
Link. Yeah, exactly. So, and then they have the little lily pads that are going around on the puddles that you have to use. The little tunnels that you have to go through instead of traversing your normal route. Like all of that is good.
Yeah.
And fun.
And I do like how in some areas, it's like when you're in the main overworld area, it's not like the entire overworld is shrinking down. You're just seeing a very miniature little like 1 pixel sized Link who's moving around on these things, right? So it's a cool balance of things. I think it probably would have been way too much effort to completely render a miniaturized version of the entire overworld, right? And to be fair, probably would have made traversing those areas take a lot longer than would have been comfortably fun for people. It would have added a lot of extra time. So one last thing I do want to say, I didn't bring this up, meant to mention it earlier. Actually, I've got 2 things. One, I love having a roll function in a top-down Zelda game.
Yes, it's awesome.
It's so nice. I really do appreciate that. One thing that I'm not as jazzed about that I completely forgot was the case in this game. I had forgotten that this game operates on a 2 items at a time bound to the A and B buttons.
And the shield is one of those items.
And the shield is one of those items.
Yeah.
For some reason in my head, I thought that this was one of those games where the shield was just permanently bound to like a bumper or something, which is a shame because this basically guarantees that the shield is something I will not be using for most of the rest of the game, right?
Yeah, basically never.
Yeah, because you've got because the sword is not though, right? The sword is not bound to one of those 2 buttons, which is, thankfully like that would have just been a bridge too far.
Yeah, that would have been really bad.
Well, is that the case?
You know what? It is actually. Yeah, B. So you can bind the sword to B or A, and the other one is whatever item.
So it's the classic Link's Awakening Oracle's game sort of system,
original system. Yeah.
Yeah, where the shield basically will never be living in your inventory
because one space is always occupied by the sword.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, it's a shame. It didn't really set me back too much, and it's not like it caused me to be frustrated with the gameplay. I'm just glad that newer titles have found a more elegant way to solve for this.
Yeah, they're not using the left bumper at all, so you could easily tie the shield permanently to left bumper. Right bumper is, of course, your roll and action button.
Yeah,
so
that's why I was confused about it, because the Game Boy Advance had the buttons to accommodate all of these things. So
right.
But notably, Matt, this is actually the first Zelda game. We've talked about this a lot. Like back in Link's Awakening, for instance, we talked about how great it was that
they did away with that.
That they did away with that. This is the first Zelda game that we have played for Sacred Realms that uses this system, because we haven't played old school Link's Awakening and we haven't played Oracles.
Yeah, no, it's it hasn't been too much of a detractor so far. I'm sure it will become more annoying as we get more items because we're gonna have to be spending a lot more time in our item inventory and just managing like what we're using.
Exactly.
So I'm sure that that's gonna become a big thing that we hate.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on to part 3, which is the dungeon map, where we talk about this week's dungeon from mechanics to music and more. This week's dungeon is the Deep Wood Shrine. Kind of our foresty dungeon for this game. And, you know, I really actually enjoyed this experience quite a lot. To me, there were a lot of very similar vibes that this dungeon has to Skyview Temple in Skyward Sword.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a really good call. It's very haunted, or not haunted, it's infested cavern with various like spidery enemies, insectoid enemy types. So it's kind of like an infestation instead of a haunted feel. And there's a lot of water that you have to interact with, and a lot of the puzzles are very interesting. You get the gust jar, which has a lot of use. One of the things I really liked was the using the mushrooms to launch yourself. That was really fun.
Yeah.
You need to give an overview of the.
Yeah. So Deepwood Shrine is a 3-level dungeon. It's got a main floor, it's got a top floor, and it's got a basement. The dungeon is all arranged around one central room that has a giant barrel, which you can free from some vines that are entrapping it, and then the barrel can kind of like freely roll. And it's got little doors on the inside of the barrel. And then once the barrel is able to roll, you can get further into the dungeon by like walking around inside of it like a hamster wheel. Super fun little mechanic. The dungeon itself is not highly symmetrical. It's fairly large for a first Zelda game dungeon. You know, it's got a fair amount of space, and I would say that this took me about a half hour to get through. Which was, of course, helped along by the fact that I didn't have it committed to memory, which is always great.
Yeah, I love getting back into dungeons and not having every move memorized. It's nice.
Not too super difficult from a combat standpoint. All the enemies that are in here are pretty weak. Comparatively speaking, none of them are overly aggressive. A lot of like slugs and things like that, little flying dragonfly enemies. None of them are too terribly difficult. Traversal in this dungeon, like you said, there's a lot of water and we don't have any ability to swim. I don't remember if we get it at any point in this game. But you do have to be jumping over a lot of puddles. And one of the ways that you do that is by what you were just talking about, Matt, where you grab mushrooms and you kind of like walk them back and then they fling you across gaps, which is really fun. It's a really fun little mechanic. There's a mini boss in this dungeon. Let's pull up some enemy names here, because like I said, a lot of the enemies in this dungeon are ones that I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, most of them are new. So there's the little slugs, which are the slugula. The mushroom guys that you can't defeat until you get the gust jar are the puff stools. There's the little guys that run around almost like helmosaurs, but they're called mulldozers. The mini boss is Matterpillar, which is kind of a Moldorm-esque enemy.
So this mini boss looks a lot like the caterpillar enemy from Mario.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And it even has a similar like enrage mechanic where it turns red and then just like kind of goes ham. You know?
Yep.
Yeah. But the way that you have to beat this boss, you hit it in the nose and then it's a damage point appears on its tail. You have to walk around to the back and hit the tail with your sword. The boss of this dungeon is notably just a green shoe.
Which is way more terrifying when you're tiny.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, so most of the early traversal in the dungeon is just kind of you getting over water and trying to collect keys to get further in. Once you get the gust jar, you're able to pull mushrooms to get yourself across gaps a lot more easily. You're able to clear away a lot of the spider webs that are draped over doorways in the dungeon. And then, yeah, I mean, leading up to the very end, at the very last thing you kind of have to do in order to get the boss key is to traverse a bunch of lily pads that are in the basement. There's
one lily pad that you use.
Oh,
that you
right.
guide
Yeah. And you use the gust jar to kind of like putter around on the lily pad and get around on that basement level in the water.
Which was really cool.
Oh yeah.
You're also you didn't talk about the big barrel in the middle that you have to move.
I spent like 2 whole minutes talking about that.
Oh, you did?
In the overview. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. The big barrel was cool.
Yeah. Well, I thought that the big barrel was so fun because it's like as a hub device, it's really interesting, right? But also the way that they're able to communicate what's happening in there with this kind of 16-bit depth of field, like, you know, there's some very impressive graphical things that are happening while you're in the barrel that are helping it to be like, oh yeah, it's very clear what's happening here. It's like a hamster wheel. I'm walking and it's turning, and when I turn and walk the other direction, then it turns the other way. And it's so fun when you're in there, because if you like try to walk up the sides of it before it's able to freely turn, you'll kind of like slide back down to the middle, like you would if you were walking around on the inside of a giant cylinder, you know?
Yeah, no, it's really fun. I think it's a genius tool for doing things in a dungeon. Okay, sorry, I cut you off so keep going. Did you talk about the boss and everything? The big green shoe.
Yeah, I didn't talk about mechanics of the boss or anything.
Fair enough. Okay, yeah, so I think the dungeon is really, really good, especially for a first dungeon. For a first top-down dungeon, it's not necessarily easy. There's a lot of moving around. There's a lot of revisiting rooms once you get the item, which is great. You know, it's fun to get an item in a dungeon and then use that item to progress further into the dungeon. So that's fun. A lot of stepping on switches to activate lanterns or to spawn heart pieces or things like that. But like, I really do think this is a great first dungeon that teaches you a lot about puzzle solving in this game, pulling switches, using the mushrooms, avoiding water, and then the gust jar to uncover hidden things. There was quite a few hidden things in this dungeon. There was 2 heart pieces that you couldn't get easily.
This is one of my favorite things about dungeons in Twilight Princess that I appreciate they're doing in Minish Cap again. I like having impactful things to find in a dungeon aside from just keys and the main item, you know? And so having one extra level of exploration required, knowing that there are 2 heart pieces to find and then incorporating that into your exploration of the dungeon for each dungeon, I really appreciate a lot.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like, it's the similar thing to getting the bonus chest in shrines in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, right?
Absolutely.
It's like, yes, I can beat the shrine without going and getting this chest, right? But I'm not going to feel like I completely cleared it unless I figure out how to do that.
Absolutely. I spent a good 5-10ish minutes trying to collect both heart pieces just to get to where I needed to be. So the one that I actually missed, which was the easiest one to get, was the one directly after the mini boss fight.
Yeah.
I cleared all the spider webs. I just didn't go through the bottom door for some reason. I don't know why, but anyway, I think that it's a well-designed dungeon that really rewards exploration and moving around the space.
Yeah, and also backtracking, right? Like there's a few collectibles that we're introduced to here. We get secret seashells, the mysterious seashells again, right?
You get quite a few of them. It's like 40 or 50.
I think I got 40 in this one. And so I was doing a lot of backtracking after I got the gust jar, right? Just to go back and suck up all the dust and be like, was there anything under here?
Yep.
And there was. I have no recollection of what these are used for.
I don't either. No idea.
So, we'll catch back up on that later for sure. How'd you feel about the mini boss fight? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. It didn't like move the needle for me necessarily. I didn't hate it. It was, it's a pretty classic top-down Zelda mini boss. That, not super complicated, pretty easy, but
mostly just kind of fun to be having mini bosses in here, right? Yeah,
for sure. Definitely good to revisit those.
I'm going to drop a note in the phonetics channel real quick. Okay, we'll see what the Discord says. I will say that history is not on your side in terms of
look,
phonetics.
at this point our Discord's just going to go against me in general. So whatever I say, they're going to say it's the opposite,
exactly.
Generally speaking.
Yeah. I agree with you, Matt. I think that one thing that I really love in a beginning of the game dungeon is for it to, I'm not looking for it to be blisteringly hard. I'm really not. I don't want that. I want a good moderate challenge, a fair amount of combat. I just want it to take some time for me to get through, you know?
Yeah.
I don't want it to feel like so what sort of experience.
No, absolutely.
And Deepwood Shrine really manages to walk that line very well. and I appreciated it very much. I enjoyed the dungeon quite a lot. In my mind, this dungeon was made up much more of like trash than it really, like it's really just the barrel that's like the big people object that's in here, you know? Other than that, the space seems like it was designed and built exclusively for like religious or whatever purposes by the Minish.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that they probably incorporated that big barrel as they did in their village. Like they use big people things to construct most of their stuff. Like it's an efficient system, and they're very adept. They could teach the Jawas a thing or two about scavenging.
Exactly,
yeah,
right.
It's very good.
Exactly.
One thing I will say is, in a detractor, is Eslo pulled a fee. And that he had a couple moments where he was very blatantly telling you what to do before you even had a chance to try. And it only happened like twice at the very beginning. It was like, oh, pull that switch and see what happens. Oh, pull that mushroom and see if it like flings you. And I was like, okay, can we not? Luckily, it only happened those 2 times, and then he didn't really do anything the rest of the time, which was good. But I hope that that's not a recurring thing. Yeah. And I don't remember if it is or not.
Neither do I. I definitely, as little hand-holding as I can possibly get in these games, I will always appreciate. And you were right. When these moments popped up, that was the first thing that popped into my head too. It was just like, okay, thanks, Fee. Like, you know.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Cool. With the first dungeon is over now, so the hand-holding can subside. It's not necessary anymore.
Yes. Yes, please. I don't want to.
Let's leave it here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we make it through the dungeon. Let's talk about the boss real quick, because to be honest, the concept of this boss is so fun to me.
It's hilarious.
It's just like, what is the goofiest, like most trash mob dinky enemy that you can fight in your big form, and just make it the boss of the dungeon, and it's scary because you're tiny, right?
Yep. Yeah. And I love that it doesn't have a mean face. It doesn't go red. It's just a green chew with that stupid grin on its face the whole time. It's like nerd,
just kind of like wobbling around, you know? Yeah.
It's a very dirt enemy, and I freaking love it. I love that they left it as just a green chew and didn't do anything special.
Just hysterical.
That was amazing.
There was some publicity art for the game that I recall of this fight. And it's a really funny piece of artwork. I'll send it to you later.
Yes, please do.
But yeah, just hysterical. I love this whole concept. I don't think that this is the case, but if the entire rest of the game boss fight situation was just enemies that are trash when you're big, but they're terrifying when you're small. Like if the next dungeon's boss was like just an Octorok, you know, or something like that, you know? Yeah.
That would be terrifying.
Oh, that would be horrifying. Yeah.
Although you're basically bordering on Goma territory there, but still.
Right. So like I said, I don't think that's the case. And I'm not even necessarily sure if it happens this way again at any point, but I'm glad that it happened here. It's just really funny.
Yeah, no, it's a great boss fight. I think we talked about this when we did our ranking of top 10 Zelda bosses. I think we at least mentioned this one. I don't think it made it into the top 10, but
God, that was so long ago.
That was like back in season 1 or 2.
I would have to go back and listen to that episode because I'm curious what we had to say at the time. we might need to like revisit that concept at the end of this whole thing.
For sure. Yeah. But like it's one that sticks out in your mind. Like it doesn't go away. Like I knew that this happened, and I've only beaten this game once, and it's great.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have anything else we want to say about Deepwood Shrine before we move on? We should probably spend a few minutes talking about the Gust Jar just as an item.
Sure. Also, I want to say the music is good too. It's very atmospheric. It's very, it's more noticeable than a lot of the music that we've had in top-down Zelda games previously. It's forward, and it feels very like spider-infested cave kind of vibes. And I think the music works really well for this dungeon specifically. Very well done.
Yep, I agree. It's not. I mean, like we've said a lot of times recently, we're still nowhere near the Stone Tower Temple, like, you know, bespoke, like, big musical number dungeon theme, you know, which I do sort of miss. But for what this is, it works really well. I think it's appropriate for your kind of first steps into a dungeon environment in this game. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So the Gust Jar, I enjoy this item a lot, and I'm very curious to see what the application is for it as we go further into the game, because, you know, just on paper, it seems like it could be fairly useful. You know, creating ranged weapons essentially with whatever crap you have laying around.
Yeah.
Seems good.
Launching jars at people was really fun.
Yeah, it was. But yeah, it's one of those items that I think is really cool in concept, and I'm glad that it has play during the boss fight. I struggle to think of ways that it could be used in the wider game past this, you know?
You know, I struggle to think about that as well. It kind of feels like, I don't know. We'll see. I hope that we're not getting into another Twilight Princess realm where you just get an item in the dungeon, you use it for that dungeon, and then don't ever use it again. But at the same time, knowing what we know about the item management in this game, I wouldn't hate if it's not like a constant thing to be in the overworld just pulling out random items.
For sure. And you know, the other thing is, I don't have a very good recollection of what the items in this game even are. Like, what the key items are as we go through this entire thing. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't even clearly remember if we get a bow in this game. So
I don't remember either.
Yeah. So it's, you know, cool. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Look, this is one of the few times we're going into a game mostly blind. Like, I think Phantom Hourglass was the first time either of us went into a game completely blind. But, you know, we've both beaten this game and remember very, very little about it other than like the main plot points and beats. So,
I went into Zelda 2 pretty freaking blind.
Okay. Sure. But I mean, you get what I'm saying. It's like a more well-established title that most people have played, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah. So I'm excited to really be able to re-explore this game in that way. So it's going to be fun.
Absolutely. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to part 4, which is Bloopy Trails, where we talk about interesting things that diverted our attention this week. And I don't think either of us did anything that could even really qualify here.
Nah. I mean, it's a top-down Zelda game. You don't have any items that can allow you to traverse the overworld more than you get. A lot of it's blocked off. Like Hyrule Castle Town's completely blocked off by the carpenters, so you can't even go back and revisit it. So like it's very railroaded to get you to the first dungeon. In this phase.
You can complete a whole heart container by the end of the dungeon.
Really? I only had 3.
I found 2 pieces of heart in the overworld and then 2 in the dungeon.
Oh, I only found 1 in the overworld. Okay.
So, that's definitely possible, which is always nice. But you know, not a lot to speak of right now. I will say that I have some very clear recollections of this game having a pretty good suite of bloopy trails. Like, there's a whole system that we haven't even gotten into yet, and I don't think will until next week. That is just kind of like the big side chase of this game. Yeah. And I'm excited to get into it.
I don't remember that at all, and I'm excited to get into it too.
Kinstones.
No idea what that is.
No?
Okay. No clue.
Okay. Gonna be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited.
All right, let's get into part 5, which is Z targeting, where we lock onto fascinating characters or enemies that we happen to cross. I'm gonna send it to you first, Matt.
I'm going to go with the Master Smith. Link getting a father figure, in this case, grandfather. Apparently just a super well-respected, renowned smith, makes a good sword. Apparently makes one every year for this tournament that everyone wants. I talked to one of the soldiers in Hyrule, and he was like, man, I enter this contest every year. Oh, it wasn't a soldier. It was just a rando guy. I enter the contest every year because I want that sword. It's a really great sword. So Master Smith seems really cool. He's important enough or well-known enough to have an audience with the king directly after the king's daughter got turned into stone. Seems like a really cool guy, and he's got a great beard. So yes,
very good beard.
So Master Smith for me.
So I'm going to use a big one here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. My Z targeting for the week is actually going to go to Zelda.
It's fair.
And for, I guess, the primary reason being that I don't know if we're going to have a great opportunity to use her for a Z targeting again in this game, which is unfortunate. But, you know, also, I never used Zelda as a Z targeting in Twilight Princess. And I feel like in this first few minutes of Minish Cap, I already have got like more reasons to be endeared to this version of the character.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
And so, going to go with Zelda. I really, like I said before, I always appreciate a version of Zelda that has history with Link, where they have like a friendly relationship. And I like seeing a version of Zelda that is enthusiastic and childlike. like this, you know, just kind of like bouncing around at the festival and like looking at all the games and the, you know, the carnival environment and everything. It's like you went to the state fair with Zelda is kind of what this whole.
Yeah, that would be so fun.
Yeah. And she's just like such a bubbly, fun character, and definitely did not deserve to get turned to stone at the, you know, at the end of our little section with her. But yeah, just a cute little incarnation of this character. And I actually really like the artwork for this version of Zelda too. When you go and look at it, it's interesting because I think it's strange because the temptation, I think, from a concept art standpoint would have been to render this Zelda the same as Tetra.
Yeah.
Just because, you know, we're taking inspiration from Wind Waker here, right? Especially with Link. But that wasn't the case. This artwork for Zelda looks very different than Tetra does. So I would go take a look at it, you know, if just give it a quick Google.
Yeah. No, that's I think you're right. Also, striking while that iron is hot is very, very well done.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. All right, well, that brings us to part 6, which is our final thoughts, in which we let Matt wrap up this section of the game in as succinct a way as he can think to do.
So we start our new adventure visiting Link and Zelda in a great opening of a new Hyrule that feels small and charming and lived in a very fairy tale-esque setting, and get quickly introduced to our main villain and our main impetus of the story. We go through Hyrule, at least a little bit of it, into the Minish Woods, meet our companion character, and meet the Minish, which are the titular characters, I guess, into a really fun first dungeon that is big and challenging and enjoyable. In the first section of this game, we've already enjoyed the music and the characters and the art style, and are very much looking forward to exploring more of this uniquely charming little adventure that we have in front of us.
Well done, as always, Matt. I'm really curious to see what the ratio is on the dungeons of miniature versus full size. Like, how many of them are you shrunk down for, and how many of them are just like you at full size Link?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. I mean, we should try to keep a little bit of track of that.
Yeah. For sure. But anyway, regardless, really, really fun first week with this game. I'm enamored with it. I think it's just a charming, fun little game. And to be honest, I'll probably go start playing next week's chunk in bed after we get done doing this. Because
absolutely,
I'm sort of in a Minish Cap mood right now, which is great.
No, I mean, I am very excited to be playing more of this game, and we're going to have a really fun opportunity to play this on vacation and record an episode with the one and only Jackson Willoughby up in the mountains.
Jackson, yeah, we're taking a family trip to Colorado, and Jackson's episode coincides with that trip. So yeah, we're going to be recording on vacation. It's going to be a pretty good time. The whiskey is going to be flowing during that vacation, so this might be a little more high energy podcast than
that one will be fun
than we're typically accustomed to. But anyway, going to be a really fun time and can't wait. Unfortunately, so we divvied up episodes today, and just because this season is so short, I think we're kind of having to operate on every regular recurring guest gets one episode this time around system. So
you're not going to have 3 Max Nichols episodes totaling in at 3 hours each this time.
Unfortunately not. I would look, if Max feels like he can talk about this game for 9 hours straight, then
I don't think we're going to let that happen.
Good for you, buddy. But yeah, I just don't think there's quite enough game here to support, just a more of a rotating cast than we normally have. I will say that that's maybe one of my biggest sources of apprehension about this game going forward is I'm having so much fun with it, and I would hate to think that it's going to end feeling perfunctory, right? Like there could have been more of it.
Yeah. That was one of our big gripes with A Link Between Worlds is every dungeon felt like 3/4 of a dungeon. The dungeon, at least this one, didn't have that problem. I hope the game as a whole doesn't end up feeling
Doesn't feel like 3/4 of a game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Maybe not. I don't remember it feeling that way. We'll see.
Neither do I, but yeah, we'll see. Worst case scenario, maybe this is just like a really fun, feel good game that we can just breeze through in a weekend in the future.
Yeah.
You know? There's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that at all.
All right. Well, this has been a really fun episode, Matt. It's going to be really fun going forward talking about this more. Next week, we're going to be back with Cody recording in person, taking advantage of that situation while we have the opportunity to do so. I'm talking about the second dungeon of this game. It's going to be a really good time. But if you enjoyed today's show and you would like a little extra Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/Sacred Realms Pod and become a patron. If you've got no rupees, it's not a problem. 5-star Apple Podcast reviews are a great free way to support us. More reviews means that more people see our show, and that makes us very happy Hylians. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Sacred Realms Pod for updates on the podcast and for behind-the-scenes action. Sacred Realms will be back next Wednesday with our thoughts on the Minish Cap Chapter 2. We'd love for you to play along with us and to share your thoughts on our social channels. The Minish Cap can be played in its original form on the Nintendo Game Boy Advance. In a digital version, it can be played through the Ambassador program on the Nintendo 3DS if you were lucky enough to get that download back in the day. If you were lucky enough to buy this game on the Wii U Virtual Console, then you could be playing it that way. It is, of course, available to emulate on a variety of services, but please don't do that unless you legally own the game in some capacity. But the way that Matt and I are playing it, and the way that I'm sure most people are playing it, is via the Nintendo Switch online service on the Nintendo Switch. Super handy, can't recommend it enough. But in the meantime, may your hearts be full, may your arrows never miss. We'll catch y'all next time. Sacred Realms is an independent, listener-supported podcast, which is produced, edited, and mixed by me, Lyndon Willoughby. Business operations are handled by Matt Willoughby. Our music is generously provided by Darknuck and is available to listen to on Spotify. Finally, we'd like to thank Nintendo for continuing to create such exceptional and innovative experiences.